The grand amphitheater of Viridia Prime shimmered under twin suns, its crystalline arches catching the light and scattering it in soft rainbows across the polished floor. Inside, the air hummed with quiet tension. Dozens of alien species filled the tiered seats, tall, feathered Zenthari with eyes like polished obsidian, hulking Cathari whose armored skin clicked softly as they shifted, and dozens more whose forms defied easy description. All had come for one reason: the Galactic Concord Summit, the most important gathering in centuries. The Void Swarm, a terrifying force devouring entire star systems, was closing in, and unity was the only hope. In the human sector, near the back but not hidden, sat Kyle Dawson. He wore a simple dark gray suit, no medals, no ceremonial robes, just the quiet dignity Earth had chosen to present. Beside him sat Lena Ruiz, her dark hair pulled back, fingers resting lightly on a datapad. Across the aisle, Marcus Boone stood slightly apart, arms folded, scanning the room with calm alertness. He wasn't here to speak, but to watch, to protect, and to remember everything. For weeks, the summit had moved slowly, weighed down by ancient protocols and mutual suspicion. The Zenthari, the oldest and most powerful members of the Concord, had pushed for a unified military command, one they would naturally lead. They demanded that all species, including humanity, surrender control of their fleets, share all technology, and follow orders without question. In return, they promised protection. But Kyle had seen the fine print. Buried in the treaty drafts were clauses that would strip Earth of its sovereignty, limit its scientific research, and place human colonies under alien oversight for security reasons. Lena had spent nights analyzing the data. "They don't trust us," she'd told Kyle during a late briefing aboard their ship. "Not because we're dangerous, but because we're new, because we rose too fast. They're scared of what we might become." Marcus had just grunted. "Let them be scared. We didn't come here to beg for a seat. We came to save lives. Now the moment had arrived." The High Arbiter of the Zenthari, a towering figure draped in silver robes, voice resonant like temple bells, rose from his central dais. His name was Vrelis, and his species had shaped galactic law for 10,000 years. He turned his gaze toward the human delegation. "Representative Dawson," he said, his translated words echoing through the chamber, "the Concord awaits humanity's final position. Will you join us in unity against the swarm?" All eyes turned to Kyle. The silence was so deep that the faint hum of climate systems sounded like thunder. Lena held her breath. Marcus's hand rested near his sidearm, not to draw it, but because old habits died hard. Kyle stood. He didn't stride forward dramatically. He simply rose, smoothed his jacket, and stepped to the edge of the human platform. He looked not at Vrelis, but at the entire assembly. "We thank the Concord for the invitation," he began, his voice calm, clear, and steady. "We honor your history, your sacrifices, and your desire for peace." A murmur passed through the crowd, some hopeful, others wary. But then Kyle continued. "However, humanity cannot accept the terms as written." A sharp intake of breath came from the Zenthari benches. Vrelis tilted his head, his crest feathers stiffening.
"Explain," he said, though his tone suggested he already knew he wouldn't like the answer. "The treaty asks us to give up our right to choose," Kyle said.
"It demands we hand over our ships, our scientists, our children's futures, to a council that has never once asked what we've learned about the swarm." He paused, letting that sink in. "While you debated protocols, we listened. While you built walls, we sent probes into dead zones. And what we found changes everything." He didn't reveal the discovery, not yet. That wasn't the point here. The point was principle. "Peace cannot be built on control," he said. "It must be built on trust. And trust requires respect. You have not shown us respect. You've shown us suspicion wrapped in ceremony." The chamber erupted, not in violence but in a storm of whispers, clicks, hisses, and electronic bursts as dozens of species reacted at once. Some were angry. Others looked thoughtful. A few, like the small moth-like Lirani delegation, nodded slowly. Vrelis raised a hand and silence returned, though it trembled at the edges. "Then you refuse alliance?" he asked, his voice colder now. Kyle met his gaze. "We refuse surrender disguised as unity." He turned slightly, signaling Lena and Marcus. Without another word, the three humans gathered their belongings: datapads, personal comms, a small Earth flag Lena had brought as a reminder of home, and walked calmly toward the exit. No one stopped them. No alarm sounded, but every eye followed them as they moved through the grand archway and disappeared into the corridor beyond. The amphitheater remained frozen for a long moment. Then Vrelis spoke, his voice low but carrying. "Let them go. They will learn their mistake when the swarm reaches their worlds." But as the humans stepped into the transport waiting outside, Marcus glanced back at the gleaming dome of the amphitheater. "They think we're walking away from the fight," he said. Lena shook her head, already tapping commands into her pad. "We're just choosing our own battlefield." Kyle didn't answer. He looked up at the sky where Earth's ship, the UNS Resolute, hung in orbit like a silent promise. They hadn't abandoned peace. They'd simply refused a peace that cost them their soul. And somewhere out there, beyond the reach of the conquered's pride, the real war was just beginning. The galaxy would soon learn that humans didn't need permission to do what was right. They only needed the courage to walk away, and the will to return on their own terms. Back aboard the UNS Resolute, orbiting Viridia Prime, the silence felt heavier than gravity. The ship's corridors were quiet, the usual hum of activity replaced by a tense stillness. In the observation deck, Lena Ruiz stood by the wide viewport, arms crossed, watching the planet below spin slowly under its twin suns. Her reflection in the glass looked tired, eyes shadowed from too many sleepless nights. She turned as footsteps approached. Marcus Boone entered without knocking. He carried 2 mugs of coffee, real Earth coffee, not the synthetic stuff the galactic mess halls served. He handed one to Lena without a word. She took it, her fingers curling around the warmth. "You really think he made the right call?" she asked, voice low. Marcus leaned against the bulkhead, sipping his own coffee. "You were there. You heard what they wanted. Total control. No questions asked." "That doesn't mean walking away was smart," Lena said. "The swarm is real, Marcus. It's already swallowed 3 Cathari colonies. If it hits Earth..." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. Before Marcus could answer, the door slid open again. Kyle Dawson stepped in, his suit jacket gone, sleeves rolled up. He looked exhausted but calm. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood beside Lena, gazing out at the stars. "We didn't walk away from the fight," Kyle said finally. "We walked away from their version of it." Lena turned to him. "Then what's our version?" Kyle reached into his pocket and pulled out a small data chip. He handed it to her. "This came through an hour ago, from Deep Echo Station near the Helios Rift." Lena plugged the chip into her wrist pad. Her eyes widened as the data scrolled across the screen. "These are swarm signal patterns, but they're not random." She tapped faster, pulling up frequency maps, waveform analyses. "There's structure here, repetition, almost like language." "Exactly," Kyle said. "Our listening posts have been picking this up for months. We tried to share it with the Concord during the early talks. They dismissed it as sensor noise, said primitive human tech was misreading plasma echoes." Marcus frowned. "So the swarm isn't just mindless destruction?" "No," Lena whispered, her voice filled with sudden awe. "It's communicating. Or trying to." Kyle nodded. "And that changes everything. If the swarm has intelligence, even damaged, broken intelligence, then fighting it like an enemy might be the worst thing we could do. What if it's not attacking? What if it's running?" Lena stared at the data, her mind racing. She remembered the reports, entire systems wiped clean, but no debris fields, no wreckage. Just empty space where worlds used to be. "They don't leave ruins," she said slowly. "They take everything. Like they're gathering resources. Or fleeing something worse." A long silence settled over them. Outside, a supply shuttle detached from the Resolute and arced toward Viridia's surface, tiny against the vastness of space. "We can't go back to the summit," Kyle said. "They won't listen, not now. But we don't need them. Earth has its own fleet, its own scientists, its own way of solving problems." Marcus set his empty mug down. "What's the plan?" "We go dark," Kyle said. "No more broadcasts. No more official channels. We reach out to the fringe systems, the ones the Concord ignores. Miners, traders, outposts on the edge of known space. They've seen things the big powers never bothered to check." Lena looked up. "And the swarm signals?" "We keep listening," Kyle said. "And we start answering." Over the next few days, the Resolute changed. The diplomatic flags came down. The guest quarters were converted into data analysis labs. Engineers rerouted power to the ship's long-range comms array. Lena worked nonstop, filtering swarm signals through new algorithms, searching for meaning in the chaos. Marcus coordinated with Earth Command, sending secure bursts of encrypted updates. Kyle drafted messages not to governments but to people, independent captains, colony leaders, even rogue AI networks known to trade in rare intel. One evening, Lena found Kyle in the ship's small garden module, a patch of real soil and green plants grown under soft lights, a reminder of home. He was watering a row of tomato plants, his movements slow and careful. "You really think someone out there will help us?" she asked, stepping inside. "People always help when you ask honestly," Kyle said, not looking up. The Conquered forgot that. They think power comes from control, but real power comes from connection. Lena smiled faintly. "You sound like my abuela." "She was a wise woman," Kyle said, finally meeting her eyes. "She taught you to listen, didn't she?" Lena nodded. Her grandmother had been a radio operator during the Pacific storms, picking out distress calls through static and wind. She said silence isn't empty. It's full of voices waiting to be heard. Back on the bridge, Marcus received a ping. A freighter called the Star Dancer, registered to a solo pilot named Eli Grant, had responded to their open frequency. He claimed to have passed near a swarm-affected zone 2 months ago and recorded strange energy echoes. He was willing to share, for fuel and safe passage. Kyle approved the rendezvous. 2 days later, the Star Dancer docked with the Resolute. Eli was young, with sun-bleached hair and a patched flight suit. He handed over a data drive with a shrug. "Saw some weird stuff out there," he said. Lights moving against the current, like they were scared. Lena analyzed the data that night. It matched their own findings. The swarm wasn't spreading outward randomly. It was moving in a single direction, fast, desperate, avoiding certain regions of space entirely. "They're not invading," she told Kyle and Marcus the next morning. "They're escaping." From that moment, everything shifted. Earth's hidden networks activated. On Mars, engineers began modifying old cargo haulers with stealth coatings and signal dampeners. On Luna, AI teams trained neural nets to decode swarm harmonics. In orbital shipyards, civilian volunteers worked side by side with military crews, not building weapons but building hope. The galactic powers still thought humanity had given up. They didn't know that while they held meetings and signed papers, humans were already moving quietly, quickly together. And somewhere in the dark between stars, the swarm kept running. But now, for the first time, someone was listening not to destroy but to understand. That was the human way. Not the loudest, not the oldest, but the ones who never stopped asking why. While the great powers of the galaxy argued over command structures and resource shares, humanity worked in silence. Across the solar system, from the rust-red dunes of Mars to the icy rings of Saturn's outposts, people moved with quiet purpose. There were no grand announcements, no victory parades. Just engineers welding hull plates in zero gravity, programmers feeding new code into old systems, and teachers sending lessons to children on colony ships drifting toward unknown stars. They were not building an empire. They were building a chance. Aboard the UNS Resolute, now deep in the Kuiper Belt far from prying eyes, Kyle Dawson reviewed the latest reports. Project Aegis was no longer just a name on a screen. It was real. Dozens of civilian freighters, once used to haul ice or ore, had been refitted with human-made stealth shielding woven from carbon nanotubes and adaptive polymers. These ships didn't hide by vanishing. They hid by blending, mimicking cosmic background noise, drifting like space dust, silent as ghosts. Lena Ruiz called them whisper ships. Lena herself spent most of her time in the signal lab, surrounded by holographic displays that pulsed with soft blue light. She had cracked part of the swarm's pattern. It wasn't language in the human sense, no words, no grammar, but a complex series of harmonic pulses tied to emotional states: fear, grief, urgency. She played a sample for Kyle one night, a low trembling tone that made his chest ache. "That's not a war cry," she said. "That's a cry for help." Marcus Boone coordinated security and logistics. He didn't wear a uniform anymore. He wore a simple black jacket with no insignia, because the mission wasn't about rank. It was about trust. He met with pilots from the outer colonies, men and women who knew the dark lanes between stars better than any star chart. One, a woman named Tessa Cole, who ran supply runs to the Neptune ice farms, offered her ship and her crew without asking for payment. Just tell me where to go, she said. Marcus nodded. That was all the contract they needed. Back on Earth, in underground labs beneath Denver and floating research stations above the Pacific, scientists worked on something even bolder. They weren't making weapons. They were making bridges. Using Lena's data, they designed broadcast drones that could send out modified harmonic signals. Calm, steady tones meant to soothe, not threaten. The first test drone, launched from a hidden platform near Jupiter, sent out a single repeating sequence. A slowed-down version of a lullaby Lena remembered from childhood, encoded into frequencies the swarm seemed to respond to. Within hours, long-range sensors detected a shift in nearby swarm echoes. The chaotic noise softened. For a few minutes, it almost sounded like peace. The Galactic Concord heard rumors. A Xanthari patrol reported strange human activity near the Oort cloud. A Cathari trader claimed to have seen Earthships moving without lights, vanishing into asteroid fields, but the Concord dismissed it. Humans are panicking, Vrelis told his council. They scatter like insects before a storm. They did not understand that humans had never relied on one plan, one leader, or one path. Their strength was in their chaos, their ability to try 100 things at once and keep what worked. Kyle knew time was running out. The swarm was getting closer. New reports came in daily. A mining station near Proxima went dark, not with explosions, but with silence. No distress call, no debris, just empty channels. But unlike the Concord, Kyle didn't assume destruction. He sent a whisper ship to investigate. What they found changed everything. The station was intact. Power was still on. Food was in the dispensers. But the crew was gone. And on the main console, scrawled in shaky handwriting, was a single phrase: "They took us gently." Lena cried when she heard. "They're not killing," she whispered. "They're collecting. Like they're trying to save something." That night, Kyle made a decision. He called a secure link to Earth Command. "Begin Phase 2, he said. "Open all channels to the fringe. Share everything. Our data, our drone designs, our signal patterns. Let every colony, every ship, every outpost that wants to help join us." Within hours, the network exploded. A schoolteacher on Titan modified her classroom comms unit to broadcast calming tones. A salvage crew near Alpha Centauri reprogrammed their repair bots to mimic swarm harmonics. Even old orbital defense satellites, long considered obsolete, were repurposed as signal relays. Humanity wasn't waiting for permission. They were acting. Marcus stood on the Resolute's bridge watching a star map bloom with new green dots, each one a human or allied ship now part of the web. "We're not a fleet," he said to no one in particular. "We're a conversation." And the conversation was spreading. Not through force, but through kindness. Not through orders, but through choice. A farmer on Mars sent seeds, real Earth seeds, to be included in drone payloads, just in case the swarm needed to grow something new. A musician in Rio composed a new piece using only frequencies that matched the swarm's calmer pulses. It was broadcast from a dozen hidden stations, drifting into the void like a hand held out in friendship. The Concord still did not understand. They saw only weakness in humanity's refusal to fight. They did not see the strength in listening. They did not see that while they built walls, humans were building doors. And somewhere out there in the endless dark, the swarm heard the music. It slowed, it turned, not toward a weapon, but toward a voice that sounded like home. That was the human way, not to conquer, but to connect, not to command, but to care. And in the silence between stars, that made all the difference. Months had passed since humanity walked away from the summit, and the galaxy had moved on, or so it seemed. The Concord tightened its borders, built more warships, and declared the outer systems lost. But far from their watchful eyes, in the cold silence near the Helios rift, something unexpected drifted. It was a Cathari cruiser, once proud and powerful, now dark and broken. Its hull was scarred with strange, organic-looking wounds, not from weapons, but from something that had gripped and pulled. The ship's distress beacon had gone silent weeks ago. No one dared approach, except humans. Marcus Boone stood in the Resolute's command center staring at the long-range scan. "It's the Iron Maw," he said. "Cathari flagship. Vanished during a patrol near swarm territory." He turned to Kyle. "If there's anything left on board, it could tell us what really happened." Kyle didn't hesitate. "Prep a boarding team. Full biosuits. Assume nothing." Lena joined them moments later, her face pale but determined. "I'm going with you," she said. If there are swarm traces, I need to see them firsthand. Marcus wanted to argue, but he knew better. Lena understood the signals in a way no one else did. He nodded. Stay behind me. And if I say run, you run. The shuttle ride to the Iron Maw was quiet. Stars stretched endlessly around them, cold and indifferent. I docked with the derelict ship. The airlock hissed open, revealing darkness. Their helmet lights cut through the gloom, showing corridors twisted like roots, walls coated in a strange, glassy substance that pulsed faintly with inner light. They moved slowly, weapons ready but not raised. The ship felt empty yet alive. In the main chamber they found it. Not bodies, not wreckage, but nests, soft woven structures made of metal, fabric, and what looked like frozen light. And inside them, curled like sleeping children, were swarm forms. But they weren't attacking. They were still. One turned its head as Lena approached, its many eyes reflecting her light like wet stones. Lena froze. Then very slowly she activated her wrist comm and played a low, steady tone. The same lullaby frequency they'd been broadcasting for weeks. The swarm being didn't flinch. Instead, it made a sound in return, a soft, trembling hum that matched her tone almost perfectly. Marcus kept his weapon ready, but his finger eased off the trigger. They're not monsters, he muttered. Lena stepped closer. On the floor near the nest, she found a Cathari data slate, cracked but still working. She wiped dust from the screen. The last log entry showed the ship's captain recording in panic. They are not destroying us. They are taking our wounded. Our sick, they carry them gently. They weep light when they leave. Lena's breath caught. She looked at Marcus. They're not invaders. They're rescuers. Deeper in the ship, they found more proof. In the medical bay, human-like biopods held Cathari crew members, alive, breathing, connected to strange vines that pulsed with gentle energy. The swarm hadn't killed them. It had healed them. Or tried to. Back on the Resolute, Lena worked through the night, analyzing every sample, every recording. She found genetic markers in the swarm tissue that matched no known species, but they showed signs of extreme trauma, as if their entire biology had been rewritten by something terrible. And in their neural echoes, buried under layers of pain, was a repeating image, a vast, shapeless shadow moving between stars, consuming not matter, but time itself. The swarm wasn't running from war. It was fleeing an ancient predator older than galaxies, a thing that erased existence. They lost their home, Lena told Kyle the next morning, her voice raw. Not to us. To something worse. And now they're gathering survivors, any life they can find, trying to save what's left. Kyle sat in silence for a long time. Then he stood. We were wrong about everything. No, Lena said. We were right to listen. That day, Kyle made a choice that would change everything. He didn't send a message to the conquered. He didn't call for weapons. Instead, he asked Lena to prepare a new broadcast, not just a tone, but a full message. A song. The lullaby, yes, but also images. Earth's oceans, children laughing, trees growing through concrete, hands helping hands, all encoded into swarm-compatible harmonics. And at the end, coordinates not to a military base, but to Haven 9, an empty star system humans had quietly prepared with habitats, medical stations, and clean water. We're not offering a fight, Kyle said. We're offering a home. The signal went out from a dozen hidden relays across the outer rim. It traveled faster than light, riding on quantum echoes Lena had learned to shape. And within days the response came, not with fire, not with fury, but with movement. Swarm vessels, thousands of them, vast and shimmering like living nebulae, began turning away from populated systems. They changed course, flowing like a river toward Haven 9. The Concorde detected the shift and panicked. The swarm is regrouping, Relis declared. They prepare for final assault, but humans watched the data and knew the truth. The swarm wasn't attacking. It was answering. Marcus stood beside Lena on the Resolute's bridge as the first swarm ships entered Haven 9. They moved slowly, carefully, as if afraid to break something precious. When they reached the habitats, they didn't strike. They hovered. Then, one by one, they released their passengers, Cathari, Lirani, even a few human colonists taken from lost outposts alive. Unharmed, some already healing, and then, from the largest swarm vessel, a single being emerged. It floated toward the main habitat, its form shifting like smoke and starlight. Through a translator built from Lena's research, it spoke, not in words but in feeling, in memory, and shared sorrow. "You saw us," it said. Lena cried. Marcus removed his helmet. Kyle simply bowed his head. In that moment, the real war ended. Not with victory, but with understanding. The galaxy had feared the swarm because it did not know it. Humanity had reached out because it chose to listen. And in the quiet space between fear and hope, peace was born, not as a treaty but as a promise. The swarm did not vanish. It settled. In the quiet star system of Haven 9, far from the busy lanes of the Concorde, the great living ships drifted into stable orbits like ancient whales returning to calm waters. They no longer pulsed with fear. Their light softened, shifting from sharp reds and jagged blues to gentle golds and slow greens. Around them, human-built habitats hummed with life. Oxygen recyclers, hydroponic gardens, medical bays filled with both human and alien healers. The first refugees the swarm had carried, Cathari, Lirani, even a few lost human colonists, were recovering, not just in body but in spirit. They spoke of being held, not captured, carried, not taken, and they spoke of the swarm's sorrow deep as space itself. On Earth, the news spread slowly at first. A whisper from a deep space relay, a coded message from the Resolute, then undeniable proof. Live feeds from Haven 9 showing swarm beings moving carefully among human engineers, learning to shape metal with light, helping to build new shelters with limbs that flowed like liquid thought. The world watched in stunned silence. Children drew pictures of the swarm as gentle giants. Scientists wept at the data. And in every home, people asked the same question: how did we get it so wrong? Kyle Dawson returned to Earth not as a hero, but as a witness. He stood before the World Assembly in Geneva, the same chamber where he had once argued for restraint while others shouted for war. Now the room was quiet. Every seat was filled. Every screen showed the soft glow of Haven 9. "We didn't walk away from peace," Kyle said, his voice steady but warm. "We walked toward a better one." He didn't speak of victory or strategy. He spoke of listening, of seeing pain instead of threat, of choosing kindness when fear would have been easier. The swarm wasn't our enemy, he said. It was a mirror. It showed us what we could become if we lost our way, if we chose control over care, fear over faith. Lena Ruiz stood beside him, not as a scientist, but as a bridge. She played the swarm's first full message, a harmony of tones that carried images of lost worlds, of stars going dark, of a hunger so vast it ate time itself. Then she played humanity's reply, the lullaby, the ocean waves, a child's laugh. The room fell utterly still. Some delegates cried. Others bowed their heads in shame. Marcus Boone stayed aboard the Resolute, now stationed near Haven 9 as a guardian and guide. He trained human and Cathari crews together, teaching them not just how to fight, but how to watch, how to wait, how to know when not to act. He walked among the swarm beings without armor, without weapons, and they moved aside for him, their forms rippling in what Lena called respect light. He never spoke much, but his presence said everything. Trust is earned by showing up. Again and again with open hands, the conquered, meanwhile, struggled to understand. Frelis requested a private meeting with Kyle. They met not in a grand hall but in a simple garden on the edge of Geneva, where real grass grew under real sun. Frelis looked older, his silver robes less stiff, his voice quieter. "We were wrong," he admitted. "We saw only chaos. You saw meaning." He asked not for control but for guidance. "Teach us how to listen." Kyle didn't refuse. He didn't gloat. He simply said, "Start by asking questions instead of giving orders." Within weeks, the old treaty drafts were burned. New talks began, not in amphitheaters but in shared workspaces on Mars, on Cathari orbital stations, even inside the outer rings of swarm vessels. Humans shared their signal research. The Cathari offered ancient star maps that showed safe paths through cosmic storms. The Lirani taught how to read emotion in light patterns. And the swarm slowly began to speak, not just in pulses but in shared dreams, in art made of stardust and memory. Earth changed too. Schools added courses on interspecies empathy. Engineers designed ships that could carry both humans and swarm beings comfortably. Musicians composed songs that blended human melodies with swarm harmonics. And every night from every continent a soft signal went out into the dark, a simple phrase encoded in light and sound. "You are not alone." The ancient predator the swarm had fled never came. Or perhaps it did, and turned away when it found not fear but unity. No one knew for sure. But the galaxy felt safer, not because it was armed, but because it was connected. Years later, a young girl named Mira stood on the observation deck of a new ship, the UNS Horizon, and watched a swarm elder shape a star map with its hands, weaving light into constellations no one had seen before. She turned to her teacher, a woman with kind eyes and gray-streaked hair. "Are they still scared?" Mira asked. Lena Ruiz smiled. "Everyone is scared sometimes. But fear doesn't have to be the end of the story." Back on Earth, in a small house near the sea, Kyle sat on a porch with a cup of coffee. Fee watching the sunset. A message chimed softly on his pad. It was from Marcus, now stationed near the edge of known space. Just 2 words. "They're singing." Kyle looked up at the sky where the first stars were beginning to shine. He knew what it meant. The swarm was sharing its songs now, not of loss but of hope. And humanity was learning to sing along. The galaxy had once been astonished when humans walked away from peace negotiations. Now it was astonished by what they built instead. A peace that didn't need treaties, only trust. A peace that didn't demand surrender, only understanding. And in that quiet, powerful truth, the stars themselves seemed to lean closer, listening.